So welcome to the October 8th EPS meeting. Glad that you're all here. We have several things on the agenda tonight, and I believe we are going to start with the data, the fall data review.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Thanks to our public for being here, and to our community as well. So we had for a number of years pushed back the data and had included it in the mid-year when our principals would present on their building initiatives. And that was mainly due to the fact that a lot of the data that was provided to us was received much later in the year from the state. It took them longer to get information out, to make things public. So here we have a hybrid presentation tonight because we don't have access to state averages or comparable data because nothing's been made public yet. So this will be a review of some end of year data from the 24-25 school year, Palisades specific, as well as beginning of the year data that is, and I'll share with you why we do the data, why we collect that data and how it's being used in our schools as a way to sort of inform everyone about some of the great work that's happening. So, of course, as we know, data is all about developing the story, right? And it is a piece of what we do in schools to help our students to learn and grow, to help our teachers to understand what they're teaching, how they can teach differently, how they can teach better, and how our principals can work to support their teachers and in turn support their students. So data is a portion of that puzzle that then tells that story about who we are, both as an individual student as well as an entire district of learners here in Palisades. So Dr. O'Connell and I put together a document entitled Multiple Measures. The board did receive this, and the public can click on this link to go through, and what will happen is you would see, and I'll do that for you briefly, is you see here that we put together a document in order to hopefully inform folks about all the different measures that exist in a school system that collect data for students, ranging from state testing to local testing to classroom testing, right? So we've differentiated that all through in this document here. It's a lot to read, but hopefully once you've read it, you kind of have a better understanding about what the assessment is, its purpose, how often that test is delivered, and how we use it here in the district. So to kind of share that with everyone this evening on specific measures, the first thing we'll start out with is our PSSA testing for grades 3 through 8. So as we can see there, every year our students in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are tested for the PSSA at the end of this, well, almost the end of the school year, happens at the end of April, beginning of May. Families can opt their students out. There are trends. Our elementary schools have very few, if any, opt-outs. The middle school, the opt-outs, depending on the year, may increase. Last year, for example, there were a significant number of 8th graders who either opted out or refused to take the test. And those are then marked, and then the school, so if they don't meet the threshold, does get a ding on their future rate index profile. Because the state has a set goal of, I believe, 95% of students sit for the exam. Pennsylvania is one of the only states in which there is a parental opt-out version, but it is based off of what they call religious exemption. And there's a process you have to go through. The parent has to show up in the school, they have to review the exam, write a letter to the superintendent saying that they've reviewed that, and then that student is opted out from the exam. But it does put a ding on the school for participation rates. So results from PSSA from the spring, and again, without getting into deep analysis, again, that will come when our principals talk about how and what they're doing in their buildings with their data teams. Again, our schools, our middle and elementary schools meet monthly with their data teams, with their academic excellence teams. They also have their MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support teams, that they look at individual students and data and work with parents on supporting students for interventions and enrichment. But a brief summary here. As we recall, last year, typically it was 4th and 8th grade, now it's 5th and 8th grade. There's a science PSSA exam. That did not occur last year because it was what's called a field test. The state is shifted this year their standards. And so this spring's science test, which will happen in grades 5 and 8, will be with the brand new standards. So last year's test was considered a field test. So students took that test for the state to gauge how well they performed, but that data is not readily available, nor is it accountable to students because the state was using it simply to get an idea of, are the questions we're asking the right questions? How do we modify and make the exam ready for the spring of 2026? So that'll be coming up this year. Also, as a side note, all exams effective this school year are required and only given online. So no PSSA exams unless it is specifically written into a student's IEP will be pencil and paper. The test will all be taken online. So here we have some of those scores for you. We can see here just a couple of things to point out. I don't have state averages for you because those are not made public yet, so I included the 2024 results as well as the state results. As you can see, in focusing first in math, a nice jump in our third grade math, 82%, which is, demonstrates what the teachers were doing in that classroom, as well as fourth grade, 81%. Now, I caution you to not look at the light purple and compare it to the dark purple necessarily, because those are two different cohorts of students, right? So when you see there the grade 3, in 2024 was 74%. Well, those students were then in grade 4 in 2025. So they did still make an increase. They went from 74% as third graders to 81% as fourth graders. So I would consider that to be a nice increase there. You can also see our fourth graders in 2024 were at 66%, and then they were at 65% in fifth grade. So while we didn't see an increase there, it is similar results for how that cohort performed the year before that as well. But again, still room for improvement. As we move into the middle school, yes?
The timing of this, would it have been the same time, like the end of the year?
Yep, it always happens the end of April, beginning of May. This year, the test did happen, was scheduled from the state to happen, and it coincided right from coming off of spring break or Easter break, as it were. So their kids were off for a few days and then came back and were testing. We, as a district, did decide to not test a certain day because that was Take a Child to Work Day, and we have lots of families and students who participate in that. So there was one day we didn't test, we tested later. Yeah. So, yeah.
Just to expand upon what you just expressed to us, looking at that chart, if I were to say 74% in 2024, those same students, the grade 4th, went to 81% as you used. If I were to take that, fourth graders going to 5th, they were at 66 in 24, they dropped to 65 in 5th grade. And that trend kind of goes in the wrong direction that we want to see. Understand correctly.
Yep, exactly right. And then what we also notice as a trend, so separating out elementary to middle, and again, I will be able to update, and you'll see on my very last slide, on slide 21, it talks about next steps. One of those next steps will be that once I do have all of the public data, I'll be able to then add to this presentation, share back out with everyone what those comparisons are. I'll use that to compare with our cohort group as we did before. We know that our elementary schools typically trend to do really well compared to our cohort groups. In fact, in many years, at least in one, if not two, or even all three subject areas, had the highest scores comparatively speaking. What we notice in math is, oh, yes.
Oh, no, go ahead.
What we notice in math then as a trend across the state, and again, this is just partially based off of what we've said for many years and also some anecdote, but the trend is that middle school scores traditionally across the Commonwealth plummet. There has not been really an explanation provided from the Commonwealth as to why that is, but it is a trend that many, if not most districts do find. I can only say anecdotally as well that I've heard from other districts that they're more concerned about their scores than we were. In fact, there are some districts locally where I've heard that there may be scores upwards of 19% proficient or advanced. So again, I can't dig into that right now because I don't have all that data yet, but when I do, I will. So separating elementary from middle school, what I would say and note here, again, is we're looking at that group. So whereas the fifth graders in 2024 scored 68%, but then, quote, only 46 in sixth grade in 2025, note how there still was, from one cohort to the next, a 10% difference. So one could say that there is a positive impact from the teacher in sixth grade working with those kiddos. Again, scores that are numbers that we like to see in comparison. But again, we're not seeing scores that are abysmally lower compared to our peers in any way, shape, or form. So those are the numbers that we see there for math. And Director Beer, you did have a question?
Yeah, so I was just going to say on that note, because I brought this up last year as well, there's a significant gap between fifth and sixth grade.
Has been.
Significant.
Mhm.
And I went back 2-3 years. It's like every year.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we figure that out?
Yep, so thank you for that question. And so we're hopeful now, and one of the reasons why, and with the committee's permission, we adopted everyday math in sixth grade to go in so that we can finish that program K through 6, because it is a K through 6 program. So one of our suppositions, or assumptions as it were, is that our students in 6th grade will hopefully perform better this year because they're being taught math in the same way they've been taught math for the previous 6 years. So they're finished the everyday math program in grade 6. And we're also adding in some ancillaries, right? So we also added in what's called ALEX. ALEX is an online program where students go on and they are working at their speed and at their level. So the program changes. So for example, if Director Freeman were to log in, he might be on a certain set of skills, whereas Director Beer might be on her separate set of skills, and Director Landis is on her skills. And you're working at your level to master certain concepts in addition to then what you're being taught in the classroom. So that's something that we added also into the program, which we did not have before. So we'll see if that works, and we'll be able to analyze that better once we get next year, the 25-26 scores back next fall. Yeah.
When they're doing the PSSAs, do they kind of coordinate with the math program that you're using? I mean, is that the problem, that we're not using a math program? I mean, it might not be that the kids don't know what they're doing. Maybe they just don't know how to put what they know on, in the test.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, and I don't necessarily want to editorialize too much, but what I can say is that our teachers are including in the classroom experiences and opportunities to be similar to the PSSA, but the PSSA exam is, while it is considered math, it is very high in literacy. And so you'll have a very large word problem. And so not only does the student have to be able to read and understand what they're reading, but then from there decide, as you're moving into middle school much more independently, what operation is it they have to then access? What are they pulling out that's meaningful from this word problem to then create the mathematical equation, right? So back in the day, I remember when I was in school and took standardized tests, question number 7, 9 times 9. Question number 8, 36 divided, right? That's not how these tests are anymore. The tests are very high in literacy. Again, not an excuse, but again, that might be something we can look at too, to find out, are we providing ample opportunities for our students before the testing window to feel comfortable and confident testing in that sort of, for lack of better terms, like environment, right? So those are all things that we're looking at this year.
Yeah, because I would say on that, I mean, that's not necessarily anything new, having to do, with PSSA, and our math standards, have been pretty consistent for a while. And I know you're going to get to this, but I'll ask this question now, so we'll get to it. Is the MAP assessment? Because I know one of the things that we said was that MAP was going to give us predictive data for how our kids are doing on PSSA.
Yep.
Is that lining up? And again, if you want to wait till we get there, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no, so I don't have that specifically in this report. What I can tell you again from conversations I've had with the principals is that it doesn't necessarily line up with how they're performing. But we're going to take a look at that more specifically. We just printed it out to send home, as I shared with the middle school parents, the family report. And on that report, it explains to them what they're looking at, and also does include the predictor for how students would perform in the spring. So we're going to do an exercise to look at all of those for all the kids in each of the grade levels, and then work through that tiered process and approach. What can we do in addition to support those kiddos who are predicted to perform at a score which is different than how they're actually performing in their classroom experience. So for ELA, similarly, again, and it's a little premature, so I apologize, and I wish I had all the data available, which I don't, because it hasn't been made public to us yet. But again, this is also a region in which across the county and the state, through Linkit has shared that from all of their, and they're in more than 110, I want to say, or 115 school districts in Pennsylvania. Every single school district in Pennsylvania that provides data to them has seen a decline in ELA tests from last year. And again, there hasn't been an opportunity to analyze why or what that was, but that is an anecdote that was shared to us from Linkit, that they noticed a decline or a lower score performed across the board throughout all school districts, 100% of their school districts providing data. Again, we're going to dig deeper into that. Specifically to the middle school though, and again, as a response to, okay, well, what is it we're doing? It's been some time since the middle school has really taken a look at their curriculum and made recommendations to that. So our middle school team has been actively looking into programs. They're doing research similar to our elementary team. They'll be going out, I'll be sending them out to do some observations of districts, programs that they have an interest in. One of them is similar, one of them is CKLA. So there is that conversation happening about, what do districts look like that have adopted CKLA K through 8? What are they seeing and finding in the success of their students? And so our middle school team will be engaging in that and coming back to this committee in the spring to make a recommendation for modifications to program. And again, that's not the only thing we will be doing, but that is hopeful in alignment then to help increase the scores that we have in this area.
Have we heard anything from the state as to why they haven't, because they were supposed to release the scores on September 26th. Have we heard anything why? I'm skeptical.
No, ma'am.
Nothing. I've contacted them twice, by the way, and I've heard, we'll have somebody get back to you. Nothing.
Yeah, we've not received any updates.
Interesting. And I did talk to DRC. They said it's all the state. It's all PDE
Okay,
who's holding the data, not DRC. Interesting.
very interesting. But a highlight, Turner grade 3, did pretty well when all things told. But again, we're going to dig deeper into this as the year goes on. Our building-based teams are working through this with, again, as I mentioned, through our academic excellence teams, putting into place with MTSS. But when it comes to ELA at the elementary level, English and language arts, we have, as you know, and with your support, have adopted CKLA, Core Knowledge Language Arts, which I'm going to show you some of that preliminary data that we have for the start of the year later on in this presentation, and I'll editorialize some of the work that we're continuing to do with that adoption and integration process. But overall, things are seeming really positive, challenging, very challenging, but also very positive. And I'll share a little bit about some of the conversations I've had with each of the grade levels, and also what our plan is for next week when we have our on-site coach. So more to come on all of this, but again, this is a preliminary. I wanted to provide what I had so that it was available to you at this time. So continuing with standardized tests at our high school level, algebra, which is a course that can be taken in 7th or 8th or high school, and then biology and literacy are all Keystone requirements. As we know, the Commonwealth for a while had pivoted to say that in order to graduate from a public high school, you had to complete and pass the 3 Keystone exams. In recent years, that has shifted to where there are what they're calling quote pathways, not to be confused with our pathways here at the high school, but pathways or options or opportunities for students to demonstrate that they're allowed to graduate beyond, so with requirements that are beyond local board decision. So our local board had made a decision that in order to graduate from Palisades, you must have finished or completed successfully X number of credits, right? Each board can decide that, and that ranges in any number. But typically you'll find mid to upper 20s would be the minimum number of credits required. The Commonwealth also put into place the Keystone exam. So one of the methods that you can graduate is by also then, so completing your local requirements, but then also getting a score either all proficient or advanced, or 2 proficient or advanced and a basic, by adding those 3 scores together, getting a minimum score. So there are multiple ways you can quote unquote pass the Keystone pathway, but there are also 4 other pathways. And so, those are all those options. What our teachers and our administration and our guidance counselors do here at the high school is they work with each individual child and student to figure out what's going to work best for them, what is going to allow them to feel successful in school, not overwhelm them, but still fulfill the requirements that are required, both locally as well as from the state. So Keystone first-time test takers. So as we're looking at this data, again, numbers look low, but the numbers for high school algebra are typically pretty low to begin with, but we also notice that we also are typically always higher than the state average. Again, 35.3%, that's 85 students at the high school. So keep in mind as well that students at the high school who are taking the Algebra 1 Keystone are students who stereotypically struggle with mathematics. And so now they're in 9th or 10th or even 11th grade sitting for the algebra exam, and either, again, 35.3% of them have earned a proficient or an advanced state or score, compared to 38.4% from the state. Biology, we had 117 first-time test takers last year with 52.1%. That first time taking the test, scoring proficient or advanced. And for literature, we had 105 students who sat for the exam for the first time and scored a 69.5%. So if you sit for the first time and you pass, you're good to go. If you don't, you have the option to retake that exam a second time or even a third time. But again, as I said, our counselors and our principals and teachers work with kiddos to help them sort of decide what's best for them. So again, they don't feel overwhelmed having to have that test anxiety and sit for this exam where I'm only 2 points off, but I have other ways that I can graduate and prove that I'm proficient. It just may not be with that standardized test. Our students at the middle school who took the Algebra 1 exam last year, 70% of those kiddos scored proficient or advanced. Continuing on with standardized tests, and I won't spend too much time on advanced placement because we did talk about this last month, but again, AP scores, advanced placement is optional. Spoiler alert, we'll be coming back in November with some recommendations for some additional advanced placement course electives. I think that all of you will be excited by that. So we're going to share that out to you next month. But again, these are optional exams that, as we know, currently and has been for many years, many colleges and universities will accept scores as low as 3 and as high as 5 to potentially place out of courses at the high school, or may even offer, at college level, or may even offer collegiate credit for students. So then you are earning college credits by taking this exam and kind of advancing your status once you get to that college or university. So again, I know this is very, very small, but it's this handout is included in board docs from last month. It just details the different AP exams with the courses that we offer here at the high school. And again, I hyperlinked the report that I shared, that report that you see there back in September. And I wanted to make a note for those who were not present for the board meeting last month that we were able to recognize 26 of our students as being receiving the honor of an AP distinction recognition, meaning that they scored the minimum number of minimum score and a minimum number of exams. And some of our students took upwards of 9 of those exams, which is pretty cool. So they were at the board meeting last month. I want to also include our technical school students. So our technical school students in their shops, except for machining technology, sit for what's called the NOCTI, or the National Occupational Competency Testing Institute. And those students sit for that exam typically in their junior year in their program area. And it's great, really great to share that for Palisades, we had 27 students who qualified to take the test, 5 of whom did not because they either withdrew or had a medical exemption. So of the 22 students who sat for the NOCTI exam, all 22 of them scored advanced or competent. So we had a 100% completion rate for the NOCTI for those 22 students, which is really awesome. And that's something that we celebrate with those students at the technical school. So that's an example. That's just a brief overview of summative assessments that we had from the 24-25 school year. So I wanted to move into to give you sort of an idea about the roadmap that leads into the 25-26 school year, which then informs our building principals and their teachers and data teams about what they're doing to create programming for students on an individual or small group basis to support kiddos and meet them where they are. So the first is the NWEA MAP. This is a diagnostic exam, which means that it basically predicts possible future performance. It doesn't say that it will happen. It won't say if you take the exam in September that you are guaranteed to earn whatever it tells you, but it's saying that statistically, if you sit for and take the exam seriously in September, your score comes out, that score you earn is indicative or predictive of how you should and could perform on the PSSA. So as we move into this exam, we'll notice that we have beginning of the year for math for grades 2 through 8. So what I wanted to point out here, I guess my little pointer's not working, but the way that they score, the score that you get is called a RIT score, right? And so here's just an average of those scores for each of those grade levels. So that RIT score. So what does that mean? Think about when you, okay, how many of you in your houses, either when you were a child or currently as an adult with your own children, found a wall where every year on your child's birthday, you would take a pencil or a pen and put a dash on the wall based on how tall they were getting, right? So think about that as the RIT score, right? It's an opportunity to establish a baseline of where that student is at the beginning of the year. And then the goal and hope is that they've grown to a higher RIT score by the end of that year, right? And then it resets the next year because the scores change based off the grade level, and then it continues to grow. And that's the goal, right? So when we look at the beginning of the year MAP scores for math in grades 2 through 8, we're looking at how students perform. So you'll see in the very far left, in those little blobs, the colors. We have yellow for grade 2, 53rd, and then green for the rest, grades 3 through 8. That's really not bad. What that means is that our second grade teachers, first of all, are receiving and having kids test for the very first time for an exam like this on a computer as second graders in September, which means that they're just coming off of summer from having been a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, right? So not an excuse, but it's almost assumed that students will score lower in second grade because it's their very first time taking this test. And it also shows, guess what? Our goal is to grow them. And as you can see here, as you go down the line, the blue lines continue to get bigger, the blue and green get bigger, and the yellow and red get smaller. And that's what you want to see, right? Because that means fewer students are in need of intensive intervention as you move through the list. I also want to point out too that as you're looking at this list, that this test is administered to more than 11 million students in the United States. And when you add international students who are participating, it's a body of more than 16 million. So when you see that percentage there, what that percentage tells you is that our second graders have scored higher than 53% of all the test takers, right? And as you move down, the numbers then coincide. So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So it is interesting when you look at the fact that MAP is telling us 6th graders are scoring higher than 71% of all other students taking the MAP test, which is 11 million. I pause because I question then, how does that actually correlate to, I don't remember, whatever percentage it was I showed you for PSSA, 46%, right? So I'm just gonna, I don't want to speak too much about it because I'm still getting used to the OWL system and what we have going on there, but those are some questions I have that I'm going to dig deeper into once I add a few more minutes into my day, or hours as it were. Because again, our students are performing and have consistently performed fairly well on the MAP test. And this is telling us again that our 8th graders scored on MAP better than 71% of all 11 million of those test takers in our country, yet 31% proficient or advanced at PSSA.
Well, the 6th grade, so no, it would have been 65%, right? Because they would have been 5th graders. So they were 65% in 2025, and then when they came this year to be 6th graders, it'd be 71%. So that's close, right? Is that right? Is that right?
So let me try to compare this right now. So at the beginning of this school year, our 6th graders would have been 5th graders last year.
Right.
As 5th graders, they scored 65%.
Right.
Right. Proficient or advanced. Here they're 71%.
Right, which is close.
It is.
That's close.
Yeah, but then notice though, 7th and 8th grade, so our 7th graders this year scored higher than 73% of the test takers, yet last year as 6th graders, or excuse me, last year as 6th graders, they were considered 46% proficient or advanced. Our current 8th graders this September performed at a 71% rate higher than others tested, yet last year on the PSSA, we're 34% proficient or advanced. So there's something interesting there that I need to dig deeper into, and I don't have that answer right now, but it's on my list of things to look into further. Reading, I want to share reading as well from our beginning of the year. So again, you'll also notice that all of our grade levels are considered to be high average. Second grade, of course, being its first year, there's no blip there. So second grade is still considered average, right? None of our grade levels in whole are considered anything less than average, but all of them, except for second grade, are considered, and 6th grade is right on the cusp there as well, but are considered to be high average in their performance. And again, as I'll pull up that slide for myself on my paper here, is that you'll notice that for, again, PSSA, that our 6th graders, our 7th graders on the MAP screen in front of you, this September scored at the 63% or 63rd percentile, yet last year as 6th graders were 56% proficient or advanced. So not too far off per se, but again, the comparable size is quite different, right? When you're talking about comparing to 11 million students versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, very different. And then 62% are 8th graders last year were 55% proficient or advanced. So again, maybe a little bit less of a disparity when it comes to reading, but at the same time, again, I'm also looking at that denominator. And so it still begs the question as to if there's a disconnect there, and if I can help to figure that out, working with our principals and our teachers, then we'll continue to dig into that deeper to demonstrate what our kids are performing. But I'm really glad that we're talking about that, albeit briefly tonight, because again, each data point is but one data point, but together it tells the story, right? And they're all important in their own way, shape, or form. And it is what is it that it's telling us, and how is it informing the work that we're doing, the decisions that we're making? What is the administration recommending to the board for recommended approval to support for curriculum initiatives? What is it that teachers are coming to their principals with by saying, here's some interventions that I want to put in place. Here's some enrichment activities I want to do with my kiddos. What are those things that they're doing based off the data points that we have that helps build that full picture of each of our students? Some more beginning of the year data is what's called DIBELS 8. So
Just before you go on, just
Sure.
again, I just want to, so I think exactly what you were just saying about just looking at the inconsistencies, because like what you're sharing with when you had your fifth graders from last year who were 65% proficient, and now at the beginning of sixth grade, we're seeing the 71st percentile. But then if we get to the end of the year and they score, like we're seeing on all these PSSA scores, a significant drop.
Right.
Like what's causing that? So that's, okay, yeah.
Yep. So that's going to be dug into even deeper, and part of that conversation we keep having and sharing with this committee and the team. Yep.
Is it the number of students that are opting out? Is that making a difference in these percentages? Like from when they took the test in fifth grade and then they opted out in sixth grade. I'm thinking if my kid's really good in math and they don't want to take the test, I wouldn't make them take a PSSA test.
Yeah.
So maybe the ones that are doing well aren't taking. Is there a way to track who's taking, who's not taking, and how many kids from one year to the next?
Yep, it's possible to look at that. I could say, to answer in brief, that initially the opting out has more, the first impact is on the percentage of participation, right? And that this Commonwealth deems that you are considered proficient if you have 95% minimum of your students take the exam. So the middle school, for example, and I don't know if they haven't told me, but I may assume that the middle school might not meet that threshold this year, because we had a number of students opt out, as well as a number, Dr. Scheibenhofer called me one day and I had to talk him off the ledge because he had 8 eighth graders in his office saying, we're not going to take this exam today because I heard that so-and-so's not, right? So there is that part of it too. The scores that are reflected, you're right. I mean, I can do a deeper dive into individual students' perceived or potential performance to see if that has an impact, because if you do remove students from an already smaller base number, there could potentially be, when you're looking at the aggregate, there could be an impact, but I can't say for certain. What I can say is that the number of students that do opt out does have an impact on the school being considered proficient for participation.
And then the math test, everybody has to take.
Correct. Math test everyone takes, yeah.
Can I just clarify, and forgive me if somebody already mentioned this while I was just making sure that I had it right, but when we're looking at the PSSA data, we're looking at, there's a cutoff score that you have to get, and you're either proficient or not proficient, et cetera, et cetera. And so the 70% of students who didn't pass the math, they're not proficient because the score dictates that. And this, even though we're in the 62nd percentile in 8th grade for reading, doesn't necessarily say that we're 62% of our students are proficient.
Right.
It just says that in comparison with others, we're up there. If we were to look at the PSSA data, is that what you were saying? If we were to look at the PSSA data, you said that we were above in some ways the state average. So we would probably be in the 62nd, 70th, 90th percentile of other students who took it, even though we're still failing, right? So I'm correct in that. So I think it's just we just have to be really careful looking at the data, saying like, wow, this looks really great, but this doesn't really indicate proficiency. It just indicates us in comparison with others versus the other one only indicates proficiency. right? Okay.
Val?
I just wanted to make sure that I was
Yep, thank you
seeing
for
it
that.
right.
So another assessment or form of assessment that we use at the beginning of the year is called, and it's new for us this year, we've had similar screeners, but with our core knowledge language arts program, it couples with what's called DIBELS 8. We are familiar with DIBELS. It is a screener, and as you can see here, it's used to identify early literacy skills. It's a snapshot, and it's traditionally administered to K through 2 students on a semi-regular basis, beginning, middle, and end of the year, with students who require additional interventions to be what's called progress monitored. And there is a recommendation for how often you progress monitor students. So you sit with them individually, you work with them, and you assess them at different points to see if the interventions that you're using are having a positive impact or not. Here in the district, we administered DIBELS 8 to all of our students, K through 5 to start the year. And then we use DIBELS and intervention for grades 3, 4, and 5 for the kiddos that need it. We will administer it to all students, grades K through 2, as we go through the year, because again, this is identifying early literacy skills, which again, our hope and our goal is that by the time you're in 3rd grade, that those skills have been at least met, if not mastered. So what we see here from our DIBELS 8 beginning of the year assessment is that we have, I'm trying to see here. So I actually met with our customer success manager. One of the things I really value about our new program at the elementary level is that we've been assigned a customer success manager. Her name is Becca. She's awesome. We have at least one meeting per month, she and I, to discuss all things CKLA. In addition to that, she's been very thoughtful and kind in that, and I wanted to share it recently, and I have it in one of the uploads under informational, is I added in how the past 2 weeks, I've had half-day sessions for each grade level, as well as a half-day for our learning support teachers to meet virtually, where I started each of those meetings for an opportunity to share some glows and grows, and then to take as many questions as people had. And I was able to then take those, codify them, correlate them, and then send those off to Becca, and then she's able to then respond, and I can share out those answers with the team, which is pretty cool. So she and I met last week to look at our beginning of the year data. We had a virtual call, and she shared with me that she noticed that what she saw insofar as our profile is pretty common. And she also noted, but she specifically wanted to note and congratulate how well, and pointed out how 3rd and 4th grade performed. And I actually shared with her that I had noticed that as well, and I had sent an email already to the 3rd grade teachers to congratulate them for the work they did to set their 4th graders up for success. Because as you can see here on the 4th grade bar graph, you can see, or chart as it were, you can see that our 4th graders did really, really well on their beginning of the year, which is great. And again, each cohort's different. Our 5th graders didn't fare as well when it came to the start of that year. But again, as we said, each particular cohort or class presents itself uniquely depending on the learners that are there, right? But all things, considered. Learning support, ESL, whatever that might be, right, makes up each of those classes uniquely. But this again is a baseline of data. This baseline data, now what this does is this informs our teachers and principals. Okay, here's a profile of what the skills are that our students have, the skills that they have not yet become proficient or mastered, and now we can take that group that has not yet mastered and can really hone in and intervene in small groups and individualized instruction. So one of the things I learned and that I've shared out with our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers is that our new program in 3rd grade has what's called the 3rd grade skills. And what that is essentially is what the program has identified as those skills necessary to be a successful reader or a successful learner. And those skills come with very specific, each one is not linear. So a teacher can say, okay, I noticed that this student is struggling with nonsense word fluency. So therefore, I'm going to go to this skills in their 4th grade. I'm going to go to this 3rd grade skills text. I have a lesson on nonsense word fluency. I or my assistant or someone can sit and work with this student to get and work through these activities that target that specific skill, which is pretty cool. And all of our teachers have access to that material, even though it's deemed quote unquote 3rd grade. So I was able to share that out with folks as well. What we are also doing with our new program is we have also our instructional assistants have been trained. And so they'll be working alongside our reading specialists as well as our classroom teachers to progress monitor our students. So again, what that means is that if a student is identified at the beginning of the year based off this beginning of the year data as being well below or intensive need, what that means is that they then need to be receiving specific interventions, which are happening during the What I Need block, which is 30 minutes every day. And what's then going to happen is every 2 to 3 weeks, they will then have another progress monitor, another quick little snippet. Are you making progress? Is this intervention working? Because if it's not, abandon ship, start and try something else. For our students who are in the yellow, so that means strategic, that means that they still need intervention, they still need support, because we want to bring them up to a higher level, a higher proficiency level, but their progress monitoring will be a little less frequent. Their progress monitoring will be coming every 3 to 4 weeks, because generally speaking, for the most part, they're getting what's happening in the core curriculum. The greens and blues, they get what's happening in the classroom. It's the yellows and the reds who, at this point, and based on our new program, is going to provide a prescription, quote unquote, as to what skills those students need to be supported with, and that gives our teachers the tools about how to help them. In fact, in one of my grade level sessions, someone said, I mean, I love it, but there's just so much. There's so many tools. I don't know which one to choose. So we're working through that this year, and that's why our coach, who's coming next week, she and I had a call late last week. We're having a call tomorrow to finalize her visit. I worked on a schedule last night for all 3 buildings, and she'll be able to come into classroom. She's going to be working this go around. She's going to model part of a lesson for each of our 3 4th grade teachers. She's also going to then be doing some small classroom observations, sitting with the principals and with me to review side by side what was observed and kind of give the principals who will be in the classrooms, both observing for CKLA, but then also eventually observing for supervisory purposes, the tools that they need to feel comfortable with the program, right? And then we're also then going to debrief, she and I, on Friday after her day at Tinicum, to then come up with our roadmap for her next visit. Again, as a reminder to our public, the board was gracious to provide funding so that we upped the number of visits that typically come with the program, so that each school has her for 4 full days. So it'll be 4 full visits over the course of the year, in addition to all the other professional learning that we have. So our grand total here of students who are identified as being either at or above core is 54%. And that percentage, again, as I said, is what she sees typically or typical with the new program and its particular benchmarks. Actually just shared a report with some of our teacher leaders, and we're going to discuss this with our principals and with our other teachers about a case study of a school district here in Pennsylvania. It is very similar in demographic, both the number of students, rural, as well as the student population size, slightly smaller than we are actually. And it showcased, CKLA showcased them because they went from, I want to say, 46% to 64% by the end of the year. So it's our hope or goal that we can move similarly in that direction, going from 54% to even way higher than that. So that's what this data provides for our teachers at this point in
The
time.
numbers in the parentheses, are those raw numbers?
Correct.
Okay, okay.
Yep. And so then in addition to the reading side of the house, we have the math side of the house. So we have Acadience Math. Acadience is also another screener that provides a baseline at the beginning of the year. So again, it's looking at numeracy skills, which are identified as the building blocks for mathematics. So again, similar to the other, it is really focusing on grades K through 2 as an ongoing measure, beginning, middle, and end of year. Whereas for grades 3, 4, and 5, it will be utilized for individual students who need that additional intervention and support. So for the beginning of the year for Acadience, I wasn't able to fit it all in one chart, so I apologize for multiple slides. But what we can see here from the Acadience data is that when we tested the number of students in each of those grade levels who were able to be tested, some students might have started testing and then had to abort the test because of just not understanding, whether it be language or just not understanding what they were looking at. So, and they're very quick components, and so what the testing system tells you is that you stop and you keep a record, and then that student will be monitored for progress. But the students for whom scores were collected are seen here. Again, our goal is to see the yellows and reds switch to greens and blues. And what's really cool about that is reflecting on my last few years as principal at Tinicum, was it was really, really, particularly in kindergarten, right? Because we don't know who we have coming to us, right? Grown-ups send to us their very best, no matter what. And here they are, and it's September, and you're 5, and now you're sitting for this really like scary person in front of you is asking you all these questions, and you're like, wow. But what I thought was pretty cool is it looks like, you know, our kindergartners across the district did fairly well. Look, I mean, there's more greens and blues than there are yellows and reds. But again, our goal, and as we noticed last year, is as we met strategically to discuss each individual kiddo, what interventions are in place? How are they progressing? Are you moving the student? Did they go from this group to that group? It was really cool to hear teachers use the data to inform their instruction and their intervention. And it was really great, and a great opportunity to have celebrations so that teachers saw that, you know what, it's not just I feel that my kids are doing it and getting it, I can see that they are. So our goal, again, is to start off at the beginning of the year where we are. This is what we got. What are we doing to move our kids forward? What are we doing to move the reds and the yellows to the blues and the greens? So you'll see that again, first for kindergarten, first grader listed here. WB stands for well below, B stands for below, AT stands for at, and ABV stands for above. Sorry, I skipped one there. Second and third grade. So second grade, again, good number of blues and greens. We have a good number of yellows. We got 26 friends in the yellow. We want to make sure that we're strategically targeting those kiddos. Again, those interventions and progress monitoring would happen about every 3 to 4 weeks, whereas our 10 friends who were in the well below in second grade would receive much more intensive intervention and work with individuals to support them in their growth based off specific skills that they have not yet demonstrated proficiency with. Third grade, we see some great scores there, especially in the blue area, which is above that benchmark that's established at the beginning of the year. And then fourth and fifth grade, again, some yellows and reds, far fewer yellows and reds than there are blues and greens, which is a good thing. But again, we want to move and have as many, if not all of our students get to that at least that green zone to demonstrate that they're at that level of benchmarking. So some next steps, as I mentioned at the onset, this is just a preliminary sort of, I wanted to give the committee an overview of the numbers that I have in front of me at this time. Our principals have already been working with their teams in their buildings to create plans for the buildings, to create plans for individual students. They're communicating with grown-ups in each of the principals' newsletters from at least I saw the elementary ones. Created a letter for grown-ups to explain the MTSS process. We've talked about that for years, the multi-tiered systems of support, how that involves the parents and coming in for meetings and working with intervention and all of that. So it's a team effort. It's the school and the family working together to support our kiddos. So next steps would be for me to update this presentation when I do receive public information, comparative scores, state averages, etc. Also, once I have information and data, updated data from the 2025 school year from the National Student Clearinghouse, this is an organization that we subscribe to that collects data on college access. It talks to us about trends in what are the colleges and institutions of higher learning that our students gravitate towards. It also talks to us one of the features or data points I find the most provocative is the persistence. So that is the number of students or percentage of students, as it were, that returns to college for their sophomore year after finishing their first year. And you'd be surprised how few students actually do persist. And I can tell you that in Palisades that we typically average at least 85%, if not into the 90s, when I looked at some of our data. So what that tells you is that our kiddos are leaving our walls feeling that they can be successful learning in another environment. So that's a really cool thing. So once that data is available, I'll include that for you as well. And then finally, our principals will share their building specific plans that had been in January. I'm going to recommend that would be happening in February because our middle of the year benchmarks happen in January. And what I can then do is very quickly collect that data and make screenshots to then include, to add into their presentations, to kind of give you a more holistic approach as to the work that they and their teams have been doing to work with our kiddos. And that was a lot for me.
That was a lot.
All right,
Good
thank
job.
you. I know we sort of jumped in with questions, but I'm gonna ask the committee members if there's any questions you didn't ask.
No, that's why I asked during, because I would forget by the time I get to the end.
No, I don't know that I necessarily have a question other than, I know that I'm infamous for perseverating on standardized test data. But again, I know, and it's different from when we were younger, I know its value and I know what it can tell us. As a board member, I want to know what we're doing, but also what we need. And I love that we put new programs in place. I love that we're going to look at that 5th to 6th grade gap, but I also worry about waiting another year to do that. So, I feel like we put an intervention person in place this past year. I felt for a while that we need intervention at the middle level. Same thing with, when we went into CKLA, which again, love that program, but it's hard. The coaching aspect is not something we have at Palisades. Do we need that? So, I know we start a budget process for the following year, but, I'd love to, know more, I guess, about the principal plans, if there are things they need now. And not that we can, just allocate money and things like that, but I just, as a board, would love to know and plan for that.
Yep, thank you for that. And just as a quick side note, and for the public present too, so we did implement a new elementary reading and language arts program. And with that, the board was gracious to provide funding. So we got the Cadillac, we got it all the pieces, which is really, really great. And I'm hearing so many positive things from folks. Is it a heavy lift? And are people everyone's feeling as if they're first year teachers again? My theme for the year is grace, go with grace. We all need to give ourselves that grace. But what I'm hearing is just our kindergarten teachers the other day when I met with them, quoting from one teacher, she's like, I am all in. She's like, I love how far my kids have come in just 5 weeks. She's like, this is incredible. And so I know it's going to take a little more time for our teachers at the upper grades, because again, as I shared, if you're a 5th grade teacher, the program has no idea who you are, and it assumes that the kids in front of you have been taught that way for the past 5 years, and now they're in 5th grade. So it's more challenging at the upper level, but we're all working together. So we have that program and all the pieces of it, which we're looking forward to utilizing. At the middle school, again, as I mentioned, we did adopt Everyday Math to finish out that program. So we're hopeful that along that addition, as well as adding the ALEX, that ancillary program for math, which we had not had before at any grade level, adding that in K through 6, which again, I'm hearing positive reviews from teachers about that as well. We'll have a training on that, more in-depth training on that on November 4th. But looking at that, and just what I'm hearing from folks is that kids are enjoying it. They're switching levels. They're giving them opportunities. So again, that's something new and different we're trying this year. And then finally, at the middle level in grades 7 and 8, as we know, the board approved the implementation of the math program for 7th and 8th, which is Carnegie Learning. Carnegie Learning, again, as well, has a standalone program, but the board, again, was gracious to provide the funding. So we are also added on the components that go with that. So the Mathia and the Math Stream. So teachers are able to utilize that as well as an additional intervention and enrichment support. So again, hopeful that by changing and doing things differently than we had will help, because again, we don't want to continue to always do the same thing without getting the results we want. So whereas there is theory and research behind implementation dips, we're doing all we can to not even have that as part of our narrative. We're looking at what we can do to be strategic and targeted in using the resources we have consistently and across the board to give the kids what they need. And so far, I'm feeling really good about what I'm sensing as I go throughout each of the schools and classrooms.
Can I ask, it sounds like general ed, you're really bombing. I mean, not bombing, I mean, really, whatever, but it sounds like you're really doing well. What about the PAL program? Because from what I hear, our interventionist isn't working with the with the PAL kids, or how are we dealing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So nothing has changed this year insofar as who is receiving specific enrichment intervention from the PAL teacher, and unless it's been discussed with those individual parents, with the principal and that team, and that decision was made to switch. At Tinicum, for example, the change that happened this year was that now all 6 specialists are helping to support the program, but there's no difference in what programs are being provided by which individual at Tinicum. And all of the parents have worked with the principal and the teachers, and things are status quo. Durham, there's been no change other than the fact that Mr. Traver is now there 1 day a week, which is providing the services to students who are identified to receive those services in the PAL program during that time, which is no different than last year. But he's not in the building 2 days because they already have a math specialist for Title I with Mrs. Moyer. And what we identified through this data was that, again, and as you recall from the spring when Mr. Trigger was here, it was like, well, I'm one person in 3 buildings talking about 6th grade levels. And so the principals met and looked at it and said, okay, well, the data is showing us that if we can intervene at the younger, at K1 and 2, and we have someone who is math-minded, let's continue to provide and offer the services to the students who need it and are requesting it through the lens of PAL and enrichment. But then let's also try to hone in and focus his abilities and where he is when it comes to that intervention piece to be that extra set, because if you intervene early and often, then the hope and goal is that you can close any of those gaps that may exist. So, and again, unless there was a conversation with a family, with the principal and that team made a decision to change what was being offered, everything's the same as last year. It just looks a little bit different in each of the buildings, if that makes sense.
No, but that's okay. It does. It does and it doesn't, but I'm not in there, so I don't see it. And,
But I think not to overstep or to what have you, but to Dr. Beer's point, again, as we said, we have one math specialist. And if you're looking at those numbers, I mean, and I don't know what that looks like, but if there's one math specialist and we're trying to utilize him in a way that's going to hopefully provide the most success for our students. And so working with the couple of PAL kids with whom he's working, but then in addition, and so let me also say, in addition to his time, so whereas at Durham, Mrs. Moyer is really working with all the other kiddos who require intervention, it's during that other additional time, it's not additional time, but during that time when she's working with kiddos, Mr. Traver is also working in developing enrichment activities that are then put into a Google Classroom, which can then be utilized by students in all the grade levels across all 3 schools to support, and Mr. Davis is his supervisor this year and is working with him in order to find interventions or enrichment activities that correlate more specifically to the PSSA to give kiddos an opportunity that when, during their What I Need period, they can hop on the Google Classroom and work on activities from math that are more correlated to what they'll see on the PSSA, but at a level that they're accessing. If that,
Okay, I get that.
Did you say, I'm so sorry, did you say, and we may have had this conversation, like, you're rubbing off on me. Did you say that all of the specialists are now teaching PAL?
they're all involved at Tinicum, yes.
Oh, at Tinicum,
Yes,
okay.
yes, yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the benefit of that helps with the fact that both from an equity standpoint for professional staff and having responsibilities during the school day. As we know, Tinicum is the school in which we have 1 grade per classroom, or 1 classroom per grade level. And so utilizing the specialists to support the PAL kiddos means that now, whereas before their activities were given or at a certain point, 1 point, now if they can work with different folks and that can be spread out across the 6-day cycle as opposed to being confined to one of those days when that specialist happens to be in the building.
Okay.
But it's all being monitored and controlled by one of the teachers who was specifically trained in PAL, and she's coordinating and keeping it consistent so that all the students are having their goals met.
Any comments from the audience?
I'll just piggyback a little bit. So anecdotally, my children's experience is a little bit different than what was mentioned, although there's definitely a lot of carryover. Ben is still receiving math instruction from Mr. Shaver through PAL. Annabelle wasn't in the enrichment group last year and no longer is because he said he was going to start to create activities that she could be doing in class. But the likelihood of her having the time to access those when the teacher now has to monitor that, like the point of him was to be able to pull kids out and work with them so that it didn't rely upon the teacher to have to say, okay, now you're going to go do this and you're going to go do that. And so that's no longer happening for them. And where I see the impact of that is 1, continuing to strengthen enrichment opportunities for the kids in our district, but 2, those are the kids, the PAL kids may be ready for a skip up to 7th or 8th grade, Mr. Chamber and their PAL teachers might be allowing them to hit that math content. But the other kids who might be able to skip 1 grade or 2 grades, that's 70% of kids who pass the PSSA algebra or the Keystone Algebra 1. Those are all kids who had to be skippers because they get up to Algebra 1 by the time they get to 8th grade. And so in order for them to do that, they need to have a history of being able to have content taught to them in order to continue that. And that's where it's getting stripped away, not to mention the fact that we originally hired him in the large part for enrichment, and that seems to be getting smaller, and the intervention seems to be getting bigger. And we keep taking teachers out of places where they're successful in what they expect and what they like to do, placing them in other places, which I think also has an impact on the quality of math instruction at the middle school. I heard a presentation at back to school night from a teacher that said, these are my certifications. When you have these certifications, they pull you out of the grade that you like to teach, and you end up teaching algebra to kids that you have not done algebra since your own 8th grade year. So it's just disheartening to hear that we keep moving people out of places where they do well and love to do what they do and putting them in places where they don't, or we keep hiring people for something and then change their job underneath them. And I feel like it just really doesn't allow our academics to thrive the way that they could. I know that's one small piece of it, and I do want to really congratulate our district on getting a solid program and working on strengthening the curriculum. I see the growth, and I have a lot of high hopes for that. There's still some places where I think we're not making the best choices for our teachers, and we're not following through necessarily with what we say we're going to do to make sure that those enrichment kids can get what they need, even if they're not palatable. Thanks.
Any other comments from the,
Yeah, I wrote down, when Dr. Donnelly was talking, I didn't want to chime in, so I had like this notes app and I was just writing things as you were going.
Who she is.
I'm sorry,
I'm Tara
I'm sorry,
Sanders.
I know who you are, but yeah,
Yes,
could you?
Yeah, Tara Sanders. I have a 9th grader, a 7th grader, and a 3rd grader, so I have fun at back to school night 3 different places. So that was a great time. Anyway, I don't know what this woman's name is, but I was thinking the same thing, that it would be worthy of exploring the cohort of students who are opting out of testing and what their performance level is on math versus, and if that's like a more proficient or advanced group. I mean, I know anecdotally, I had a parent of, I'm now 9th grader, but they took the PSSA last year, and she's like, I think I want to opt my son out. And I was like, why would you do that? She's like, well, he's already advanced on math testing, so he just doesn't want to take this test. It's just he's griping and moaning about it. So I think as much as we value the test, that's not the same sentiment in the community, and it might be worthwhile exploring some kind of public relations effort to reach out to parents and students, and because they're not intrinsically motivated to do well on this test. It does not matter to them at all. It matters to us, but it doesn't matter to them. And so I think it would be really interesting to see if that cohort is actually made up of more proficient and advanced students. The other thing is, I think I agree with Jill in that I would be concerned about moving teachers around to not their area of expertise, especially if they're being moved from one content area to another. They never really get the chance to perfect or master their content area. And that I would be interested to hear feedback from the middle school teachers on their perception of how supported they feel and the resources they need to do their jobs well. I mean, it's one thing to buy programs after programs, but if they don't have the time, energy, and support to, implement those programs well, then that's going to impact our students. My other thing is, you mentioned a program coach at the elementary level, and I mean, this is my first time being here in a long time, but is there a program, or is there a supportive coach that can help middle school teachers? Can we explore that? And I think that echoes one of the board members, or my board directors who were concerned about the lack of support for that group of students. And I'll just echo again how I'm very happy with my students and their teachers. I think they do a great job. And I am never kind of upset about test scores because again, these are just one snapshot, one day, and they're not necessarily indicative of the hard work of our teachers.
And we do have a coach for the middle level.
Great,
math.
thank you. For
It's
just
not
math,
as, not as
or-
robust for, as the elementary CKLA because that concept is much more challenging of a shift for teachers. But with Carnegie Learning, we do have built in, there are two full on-site days of professional learning for the full day. One was in August, one will be November 4th. And then that same, well, it'll be a different guy in November, but the same gentleman who came in August also came for a full day of coaching and observations in September, and he'll be back. I think we scheduled him for early December to again see the growth, analyze the data, work with teachers, and that sort of thing.
But we don't have a coach in the district. We don't have an
No.
employed coach. We hire them from the company.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct, yeah.
Thank you for that. Any other comments?
Just that this has been going on for years with these percentages, and it drives me crazy. After Wallace Frank was here, you know, the SAT scores are not, anybody can take an SAT score. Stop basing the whole school district on what that one thing is. Doesn't mean our kids are stupid. You know, it means that people took the test that shouldn't have taken the test, and it drops our numbers down. So it's percentage based on who takes the test, how well they do. What are they, you know, are they a good student? Are they a bad student? Did they just take it to take it? I mean, there's too many factors that go into that. And I hate that now, I didn't know they could opt out of the test. So now we can never get proficient, like we can never get 100% of the kids, because somebody's always going to drop out of it. So that is another factor that I didn't realize was going on. But yeah, I mean, all our special needs kids take this test, correct? So it's, I don't know, I don't think it's a good measure of how well our students do.
But kids take SATs because they want to go to college. These are tests that measure the floor. They measure the standards. And the standards are what we want all students to know and be able to do. We want them to read a couple of passages, be able to answer some questions, and be proficient, not perfect, proficient. And same thing with, like you said, our special needs students. This is why they have IEPs. They have IEPs to be able to help them do the things that they need to do. So this is a measure of the floor. It's totally different than AP, than SATs, and all of those things. And so, you know, when I look at our third and fourth graders, and we find that that we don't have 100% proficiency, the research shows us that the chance of them moving forward as they get older in grade levels is not good. So we want to be able to make sure that we can get all kids to that proficient level, not perfect, but proficient.
Yeah, but they don't take it into consideration, do they, the special needs kids, and that,
Yeah, there can be accommodations and
I'm saying,
there
that's
can
what I
be,
mean.
it can be,
is
there
it
can be.
equal with a regular ed student, or, you know?
There can be accommodations on the assessments. I mean, I know it's lower than what we do every day,
So
right?
like how many
So-
special needs kids take the test, how many regular ed kids take the test, that, you know, that's the kind of thing that mix, and if you opt out and you were scored high, and now this year you're not scoring, I think, you know, the numbers can be skewed all different ways.
So I would say just in brief that, and yes, so there are accommodations, but the test is still the same. So a third grade test is a third grade test, whether you are a third grader who is advanced or you're a third grader who's reading on a kindergarten level because you have a cognitive disability. And so your accommodation may be something that the teacher can scribe your essay, which means that you still have to be able to answer the prompt. You just don't have to physically write it yourself. Someone else can do it for you. So, yeah, so there's a little bit of everything. But yes, and I would agree 100%, right? It's that baseline, right?
Right.
Yep. Okay. All right. So I'm going to just wrap us up here on this. So I appreciate everybody's input. Thank you, Dr. Donnelly, for putting this together so early so that we could review it. It was a heavy lift and you put yourself right in the bullseye, you know, for some of us here on the committee. I'm with you. I don't like putting so much emphasis on the testing. I think it's one day. And to be honest with you, I was going to opt my kids out of taking those tests, but I was on the board. I'm like, oh, it's really going to be bad. I'm going to have people coming at me.
Nobody would know.
No, I think some people would know.
The kids would know.
So I've always preached this, okay? The fact that you get a kid to sit for 1 day or 3 days and, you know, how they happen to score on a test, in my opinion, has extremely little bit to do with the quality of teachers we have and the ability that that student is going to be successful as they move forward. But that's just me. And I also understand there's certain things we have to do. So to me, it's trying to find that balance and not driving ourselves nuts. Okay. Trying to just, play to that one piece of what makes an overall good school district and good student. So one thing that I would just like to note, and this goes along with what you were saying, is I understand your thought for moving the presentation to February, and I'm not saying not to do that, if that's what's going to be best, so we have everything. But I am also concerned that we can still build it into the budget, even if it's something that's presented in February, but it is late to try to start doing that, but I know that we still can. I'm just going to ask a little bit, and I'm only one person here, but that our presentations are focused on where we see the needs and not, I want to put this nicely, not the fluff and patting ourselves on the back.
Yeah.
So, I've been on the board now for 12 years, and I've pretty much seen the same kind of data presented every year with slight differences here and there. So we know where the problems are, or where they're not, but because of the way the testing is done or, so forth, there is a problem. So I trust that, you're diving into that, like you said, looking at the map and trying to make sense out of this. But what I would really like to have is it be hyper-focused so that our eyes don't at least my eyes, I only say me, okay, start to glaze over all the other stuff that quite frankly, we don't need to talk about because it's like, okay, yeah, we're good, awesome. All right, move on. Let's get to the stuff where we know we need it. And I want the building principals, if they haven't already done it in their budgets, I want to hear, forget the money, what do you need to make this better? What do your teachers need? And then it's going to be up to us to say, hey, can we do this? How do we do it? But, Dr. Connell, you do awesome every year at putting up with us and like, okay, well, what can we do, to try to keep this budget down? And, but I want to make sure that we sort of take those reins off a little bit, because it is totally unfair of us to be saying that in one breath and then in another breath saying, oh, but we don't like these scores and we don't like this, we don't like that. And well, Powell doesn't have quite as many people as they need, but then at the next meeting you go to, we're on you about, oh, the budget's over. We want a balanced budget. We need to get this lower. So I will be fighting to make sure that we are not coming at you from two different ends, as best that I can. But I do want to hear, I don't want to hear what, and once again, this is just me, I'm not talking for the whole committee, but personally, I don't want to hear what the principals are going to do within the confines of what they currently have. I mean, of course, I want to hear that part, but I want to have them feel open to say, this is what I feel though we could really use in order to take us to the, to the next level, and then we'll have to decide whether we can do it or not. So.
I agree.
Make sense?
I totally agree.
Okay. So if we're good, I'm gonna wrap that up and move on. So we have under discussion, the annual cyber MOU with PEA.
Yeah, so, and these items should be relatively brief. So
I'm planning on it.
So
We do this every year.
Yeah, we do this every year. This is every year, same thing, every October.
Correct that right to it.
Yep. Ready? All right, so if you're ready, we'll move it forward.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody in favor? Good. All right.
Okay.
The Moravian University College of Health affiliation.
Yeah.
We have a student teacher or teachers, is that?
Yep, so as you know, we move these forward to the board for agreement for affiliations. This is an awesome opportunity. Moravian University's College of Health specifically reached out to provide, there's a student teacher for speech and language pathology who would like to learn from one of our specialists. And so for that student to join us in the spring. So this is an affiliation agreement like all the rest. So if the committee is in agreement, we'll move it to the full board next week.
Oh, I was reading through it and I could not figure out what in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all it says, just, okay, yeah.
And it's like we have with other,
Yeah,
so.
but it didn't read like the others did.
Yeah, because those are all from colleges of education, and this is the College of Health.
Okay,
And so they have their own, I said, oh, I got an agreement with you until 2027. And they said, well, we're the College of Health. We would
It's
like
a
to have our
different-
own, yeah.
okay, all right, good.
All right, move forward. And then the biannual pay survey that we do every 2 years.
Yep, so that we just have a tradition in the district that we approve the use of the PACE survey. As a reminder, this is done every 2 years. It is administered to our students in grades 8, 10, and 12. All of our data and our historical data is on the website. Principals have, both the middle school and high school have shared this with parents for a few weeks now in their newsletters. Regarding that, students do not have to take the survey if they don't wish. They can simply not, and there's no problem. Of course, the more students who take it, the better data we get. But again, it's just making everyone aware that this is coming up this month.
Is this something that the parents have to opt the students out, or does the student?
Either
just
way,
decide?
the parent can do that, or the student themselves can show up and say, not really into, I'm not feeling this, I don't want to do it.
Do they do it on school time?
They
or
do,
is it-
yep, during school time. There's a schedule that the middle school put together and a schedule that the high school put together and they will endeavor to have as much participation as possible. And we're pretty good with our participation. But there is that option, and we've traditionally just had a board motion to recognize that we conduct this every 2 years.
And it's required by the state?
It's not required by the state, but it is very much sought after so that we can collect current data from our students and their lived experiences and make comparisons for areas of need from here to Pittsburgh.
Any questions on that?
Yeah, good.
Okay, to move forward. I didn't jump in with the other one, sorry. Any comments? All good. Okay, well then we'll move that forward to the board for the pays. So planned instructional policies, this is something, if I'm correct, that's due to come up at the policy.
Well, we got the policy meeting today though, and it doesn't look like it's on there. So
Okay.
we may have some time if we want. If we
Okay.
want. I
Um,
know it's 5:08, so. I don't see it on here.
Okay.
I'm looking right now.
Well, and I think this was something in particular that you were, asking to bring to the committee. Does the committee want to discuss anything in particular that I guess in this case we would take to policy? Right? So,
Yeah, so I was recommending that we look at, because we're supposed to in policy be looking at the 100 level policies. And 2 of the 100 level policies focus on plan course instruction, plan course statements. And, I'd made some comments at the last board meeting about plan course statements and things like that. So I thought, is this a good place at, this committee to talk or hear from Dr. Donnelly in terms of as we think about curriculum and developing curriculum and what new programs and what's the plan for, curriculum alignment? Because again, I think it plays into a huge, not to go back to scores, but I do think it plays into, our students' achievement, that well-aligned, well-articulated, that vertical articulation. So I wanted to kind of hear, where are we going with that? And do we change the policies? And I thought maybe that could start here rather than being at the policy committee, because I have a feeling the policy committee may be like, hey, let's ask EPS. So I'm not sure.
okay. Well, is this something also because we're a little bit
That's why I'm
tight on
thinking
time,
that we could probably wait. Yeah.
to
and-
either wait and are you asking that maybe in particular that our director of curriculum,
Yeah.
weigh in
Exactly.
and maybe make sure that, I guess, bring it to us with any
Maybe
recommendations or take it right to
yeah,
policy?
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah,
Karen,
where
if
are
you
we?
have suggestions too, that would be great
Okay. Like,
hear
where
what
are we,
those
where are we
Yeah,
going?
so the
and all that.
Do you
policies-
think she would?
I don't know, I just can't imagine, right? I'm
But
trying to stay in my role, I'm trying.
But if you have in your mind, what are those things that you would want to see from a policy perspective? Because
Okay.
our plan core statements are very typical.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're very typical from where you may go district to district. So when you're looking at other districts and saying like, their policy has this included.
Yes.
This is something I'd love to see.
Yes,
That would be
the
a great
policies are very
conversation.
similar, district
Correct.
to district, but what we, like when we talked about that, the.
Curriculum
The
mapping,
or the
sure.
Atlas, the
Atlas
Atlas
curriculum
system
mapping,
and like,
yeah.
you know, Quakertown and Penn Ridge makes their curriculum development process look different than ours.
Right. So there's
So-
the policy part.
Yes.
And then there's sort of all the
The
work that.
implementation, right?
correct. So I guess that's where my question would be from a direction
Right.
forward.
Is this a policy or is it,
Correct.
that's right.
Correct.
That's where I think we need, that's what I think we should discuss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I'll just, if I can, I'll just jump in. That would probably be one of the key issues for me, is when I read these policies, when I look at the planned course statements, I cannot see the materials that are being used for specific subjects and specific units that are being taught. I'm sent to a list, and that does not cut it for me. I want to see, like the other districts do, they lay out the units that they're doing, and they list right there for the units that they're teaching, the materials and the instruction, the supplemental things that are being used for that unit. That's where I want to see it, not in the list.
Then
So,
you'd have to change the policy every year.
so,
Well,
That's
no,
what I
it's
think we have to
already in there.
discuss. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
that's-
I don't,
guess, right.
but see, that's where I'm not
I
sure
don't
that I
know,
see
right.
that, Karen, because
Yeah.
I feel like it's already in there. We just don't implement it.
all right, so I'm
Or maybe we need to be more specific in how it's implemented, but anyway, go ahead, Scott.
So I'm just gonna make a suggestion, because I get concerned when you put something in policy that to me should be floating. You know, that I want our teachers to have that ability within guidelines, you know, to make sure that if there's something new out there next semester, you know, that they want to implement and put in there that's going to enrich the students better. I don't want it to be, oh, nope, that was in, you know, policy 3 years ago, and, you know, you can only use those texts or whatever. So that's my only concern. But do we want to?
Well, it doesn't have to be specific. I'm sorry, Scott, I interrupted. you.
No, it's okay. You know, well, anyway, I think it's all good points, and that, you know, I think it's a good idea that we discuss it and then give our, you know, guidance if they want to hear it to policy. So, do you think that we'll have time if we sort of kick this to our next meeting, but ask that everybody come prepared with their comments?
yeah, November's going to be pretty busy.
Pretty big, okay.
But, I mean, if people come with like ideas for what they would want to see in that policy or adjustments to that policy, I could see that being a sharing and discussion, and then that would go to policy. I think that would make more sense to go that way, because Karen, you know how our committees work, they move to different committees, which
Right.
brings more
Right.
people, and they look at it in their lens, but I think that would be
Right, okay.
helpful.
So I'm gonna ask, we'll put it on, you know,
Yep.
the next agenda,
Yep.
and, you know, I'll work, you know, Dr. Donnelly with you to
Great.
make sure that I'm gonna keep things as, on time as good as possible. And I'm just gonna ask that, you know, the committee members, you know, bring your concerns, maybe even do a little, you know, chatting, you know, just to make sure that we try to have it as pinpointed as
We never do
possible.
that.
And, you know, and certainly the public, this does not mean that I don't want you to come and give give your input. I don't mean to cut that off in any manner, shape, or form. It's extremely valuable. But we'll just,
give us their inputs.
well, right, give us your input, you know, individually, and then just know that these are just going to be comments coming from EPS over to policy. So then it's going to be up to that policy committee to discuss it, and all of us have the opportunity to show up at the policy meeting, you know, to have further discussion over it. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We have no committee approved expenditures, right? So we are on to civics assessment.
Yeah, this will be really brief and great
Another piece of data, but I'd like to showcase it separately. So Act 35 for the Commonwealth, beginning in the 2020-2021 school year, required districts to assess students at least one time between grades 7 and 12, and they had to pass a civic success assessment. The district itself could design their own, or you could utilize the naturalization assessment for citizenship. And so we selected the latter because why develop something new if something already exists, right? That fulfills the requirement that's provided to us. So we are required to report this to the Commonwealth each fall. So our results are as follows. Last year, our students in 11th grade in US and the World 3 took this course. 112 students took the civics exam. All 112 passed the civics exam. And of those, 56 students earned a 100%, which is pretty cool. And so, so great work to our students, great work to our teachers. And then the Commonwealth also sent to me a certificate that looks just like this. And I then had to print it and sign it for each of those 56 kiddos. So.
Do they take all 100 questions?
No, they take a randomized selection of 10 questions and
They
you
only
must
do the
answer,
10.
and you must answer at least 6.
Okay, so it's just like what they would do for a citizen?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that.
Okay.
Not for our students.
And then if you don't mind, Director Freeman, I'll just say that the letter C, new programs implementation, I included that within my data presentation. I just updated it from last month to put in bold any new updates for meetings that we've had.
Okay.
So then, another informational item that was asked to put together real brief is online course offerings here in the district. Just wanted to showcase the 2 different ways that we go about that. The first is the Palisades Cyber Academy. So the board last spring approved a new vendor for Palisades Cyber Academy, and that is managed through Mrs. Deemer, who is at the high school. She's one of her roles is cyber dean, so she helps coordinate those courses for families who are looking for a full-time online experience. So we have the cost of that there that's built into our budget that we propose every fall. And as you can see there, $3,000 for a middle school student, $4,800 for a high school student is by far astronomically lower than a cyber charter school. And so again, the board has been gracious to include those funds in our annual budget that we have available to support families that request that route. And then I want to just include it here from our current curriculum guide. I don't need to read all of them to you, but I broke them out by department. These are courses that our teachers created. So therefore that's zero cost. And these are courses that students can opt to take online if for any variety of reasons, ranging from they want to add an additional course or it doesn't fit in their schedule or what that might look like. But these are based off of our planned course of study, except for, I do apologize, I didn't note this. The only course on here that would have a fee that we do cover is with Rosetta Stone as part of our World Languages pathway. We do offer one of the options for students is to take a course on less commonly taught languages. And so that would be funded through that budget as well. And those 2 options are either Arabic or Mandarin. But those are online options.
So there's only intro to statistics from that, you know.
Correct.
What was that, Cora?
There's only intro to, I can't get the word out, statistics.
For
That's-
PHS online.
Yeah, for the high school online.
We offer an
But
online.
Can you hang on just a
training
minute? Can you hang on just a minute? Let me get the committee first, sorry. Other
No,
question
I'm
from
good.
Committee?
Good.
Okay, I have a question, but I'm gonna hold off. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Being an insurance agent, I have a lot of parents that their schools don't offer driver training classrooms. Is that something we offer, like
So we have it in,
cyber?
It's on the back of the page.
we have driver ed classroom, but for insurance purposes, you also need the on the road.
Right, they
So
do that,
that's where, yes.
but they don't have the classroom, so they can't get the credit. So I said, I know
Here?
our, no, not here.
Oh, yeah, we do
Because
driver ed.
We give driver ed
Yes.
classes. But would you have a cyber class for a student from Penn Ridge that didn't have driver ed classroom, 30 hours of classroom? Would we have anything available?
We do not.
Okay.
Um,
Might make a lot of money that way.
yeah, there could, the short answer is no.
Right, okay.
The longer answer is, you know, we can certainly look as far as partnerships. We used to have one with Quakertown, which was a seat exchange. So we may be offering a course that their students would benefit from, and they would offer one that, and it would be a seat exchange, not a financial exchange. And that worked well. And that dissolved.
There's a lot of Penn Ridge that do not have driver ed class. They don't give it, they don't provide it in their school.
Okay, thank you for that. Mhm.
So I'm just going to mention, it was my understanding that we offered classes, and part of the reason that we went with that new company was not only for our own cyber academy, but that we wanted to have the ability to offer a variety of classes that if a student either had the time in their schedule or just wanted to take extra classes, that we could provide that through an online experience. And that it might be a cost to the students,
Mhm.
but that we had that. I remember years ago, the MOOC, the massive online
Sure.
content.
Yeah.
And, you know, and this in particular came up with our German program having to make changes for lack
Yeah.
of being able to find teachers and whatnot. So from the looks of this, we don't offer the ability for a student to take, like, you know, here's a menu of items, which could be maybe German 3, for instance, where they could take it online through what we're providing, and then depending upon who's paying for it, because
I would
I thought
say-
we did.
I would say it's more of a case by case to fill a student's schedule as opposed to here's a dozen online options that are available to you, like anybody could take them. So I would
Yeah.
say those schedules are created on a case by case basis. So what do you need to meet your graduation requirements as opposed to what's a cool class that all of us would, or you want to take one and you want to take one and you want to take one. We can certainly look into that, but if those courses were used to build I'm just repeating myself, build a student schedule as opposed to we've got, you know, media and society, or we've got, I don't know, I'm gonna make stuff
But
up.
is there a reason, because I feel foolish, because I thought we did this.
Mhm.
Is there a reason that we don't have that as an option? Like, can we not have that with the vendor that we use?
That the district would pay or that the family?
Well, forget who's paying, just for the time
Okay.
being, you know, is there a reason if a student doesn't necessarily need something to fill a graduation requirement, but says, hey, I'm really interested in, you know, pick something.
Sure.
And, you know, here we do have it available through this Cyber Academy that not, you know, like I said, not our plan course,
Yeah.
but it is available through the vendor. If that student wanted to take it, we can't
Well, we could have done it for
provide that.
German, maybe,
I-
right?
well, that's where, you know, honestly, that's where this came up, and that I'm, you know, asking the question, because I thought that, for instance, in the German,
Mhm.
that, you know, a student could be like, yeah, you can take it online. We're not gonna have a teacher here
Mhm.
necessarily to do it, but if you want to, we can offer that through our online course offering.
Yeah,
So,
we have not opened up all of the scope of what's in our online provider as like a catalog of, you could take
Option.
anything. But I think it's a great conversation to see what ones could be added. So instead of the whole catalog of what they run, maybe there are 5, 10 that are, you know, forensics is neat. Of course, there's neat courses out there that kids are interested in, but
Yeah.
we can get back to you on
So
what that would be.
well, hang on, all right, okay, go ahead.
when my students are in, my children are in, one of the things I wanted them to be able to utilize or learn was Latin. And I think anyone in here that is in medical or science, Latin is like the root of a lot of stuff. There's just some things that are advanced anatomy, physiology. They're just things, if you're going into medicine or you're going
Yeah.
into healthcare, you know, baselines, yes, you can take some courses at the college and stuff like that, but
Sure.
that goes
Yeah.
to your point, and that's, to me, we're pulling the reins back on some of the kids that were gifted, maybe don't have a full schedule outside of the academic portion of the school. I'd say most kids' schedules, half of it's school, the other half is extracurricular activities, at least it was in our household.
Any other comments from the audience? Yes, Tara?
I was the person who kind of brought this to your attention.
I wasn't gonna out you, but okay.
Yeah. I'll just like make a public statement about my dismay that German was discontinued. So as a nod to the policy committee, I'm hoping that you can come up with maybe a policy for abolishing a position or program. Whether that's just an informational thing for parents and people that they affected over to students, that would be something that could be like the minimal thing that a district could do when considering abolishing a program. And I maybe understand now, it's hard to find a German teacher or whatnot, but I was also further dismayed to find out that my son was automatically put into Spanish 1, and he was planning on taking German 2, and then hopefully German 3 and 4 later on. So when I requested that he take an online German class, I was said, we don't do that here. That was also shocking to me, because as a teacher in a neighboring district, we do offer those classes for students who cannot fill them in their schedule, and or enrichment classes for like additional AP classes that they want to take. And I asked Director Freeman to consider this as some way to address several issues in our district, like declining enrollment. It will come declining programs, so it's going to be harder for students to schedule their first, second, third pick electives. So this would be another way to kind of help them have a comprehensive education, not just be slated into a class they don't want to take because that's the only one that's available at that particular time. And then he had echoed that I guess your son at one point wanted to take a certain calculus class or something, and he couldn't because there wasn't enough students to enroll it, and I think this could satisfy that. It's not the preferred method of instruction, and it's certainly not something that I would want to supplant in-person learning. I know that there would be fear from teachers unions for, would that take away jobs? But I would say that you would maybe offer the courses that aren't offered currently to students. And if there is enough interest, that would then provide enough data to say, oh, then we should offer an in-person class for this. And I would also further suggest that it would only be for students, not only be for students, I would say that it's not in place of something that's offered here. Like, oh, I don't want to take it with that teacher. I'll take it online. That would be like a suitable reason for taking it. I checked in with Quakertown and Penrich, because that's like our little circle here. They have a policy for this. And New Hope also has a policy. I brought it along, and I also brought your current policy that talks about alternative instruction, which seems to be very limited in scope. And I would ask that we consider, first and foremost, offering students who were blindsided by the abolishment of German, the opportunity at the district's cost to take a German class that is through an accredited program, not just like a Rosetta Stone supplement. And then, therefore, thereafter, looking at next year offering this as an option. It could be at the parent cost for enrichment, and if there's hardship, perhaps the community fund would supplement the cost. So, do you want these two?
Yeah, definitely, thank you.
I know it's a
Thanks,
long
but-
night and I didn't,
No,
we're all
sure.
tired. I usually go to bed at 9, so this is really, but I'm sorry, I like to throw them at you.
No, it's
I'm
fine.
hopeful that it could be something that we consider.
No, thank you. And I'm going to ask if possible, could you email these to me?
Yeah.
Just, okay.
Well, one is from Palisades, one I just wanted to do the other.
Yeah, I more meant the New Hope that you had, so. I don't know if anybody wants to see these.
No,
Yes.
I can look them up.
Okay. So I guess, well, is there any other comments before I make my final comments on this?
No.
Anybody? So I personally want to investigate this and open it up, whether it's obviously it seems like it might be a policy change. But at least get it started here, that it might also need to go to fiscal for who's paying, for this. So, I'm going to look to the two of you, the smart ones, is that, what's the procedure so that we talk about this again? I guess you give us our options or suggestions for how to implement this, but, I thought that it was already in place. So I'm not quite sure why I, was ignorant to that, but, let's fix it now. So. I mean, that's if the rest of the, committee and board
Yeah.
decides, but I certainly think we should be offering, offering this option, for these other courses, if it's something that we can feasibly do. And certainly if our neighboring districts are, are doing it, I certainly want to be able to offer it. And, the idea of the cost and who's paying, I think is, very valid, and we need to discuss that part of it, so.
That's good.
Okay, so would this sort of be for another EPS, or you'll just get back to us as to where you think it's appropriate to start that discussion?
I don't think we could do November.
I think the right next step is we'll take a look at some policies and then we'll report back to the committee with some thoughts we put together. And then from there can get direction together as a team to decide if it will happen at another EPS meeting or if the right next step is a different committee first and what that looks like. So we'll put our heads together and then report back to you.
Okay. Is that, yeah. Sound
Because I don't
good?
think there's anything policy prohibiting it per se.
I was just looking through policies. I didn't really see any.
The one I gave you, it says that alternative methods of instruction have to be part of your planned program.
So I see
I mean,
this.
maybe it
This alternative may be permitted to help meet the unique needs of students pending submission of the required application and the approval of the principal and another administrator. But that's just one line.
Is that Palisades or is that the other?
Oh, that's New Hope. Sorry. Sorry.
What's the problem?
Up 100, okay.
What's the number?
An alternative instruction, yeah, I have
Okay, well, are we fine?
I think it's some definite.
Yeah, we'll look into it. We'll provide a method, some options, and it can be a choose your own adventure.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
I think the only note that I had, and I'll just put it in here, when we were talking about the November meeting, I think, Dr. Donnelly, you said about looking at some potential AP electives or something like that. Rich and I were talking, Mr. Heffern and I were talking about this also at the 339 meeting we had about dual enrollment and offering more options around dual enrollment, but that's kind of weighing down a little bit. Are there opportunities there, or could it be online opportunity? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay,
What courses that we offer.
all right, so I think that's it for that. Our next scheduled meeting is November 12th at 6:30. And is there anything else that the committee wants to bring up? All right, anything else in the audience? All right, well, thank you very much for coming out, all the information.